welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from ISAF. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrested 683 people on Wednesday, all suspected to be undocumented migrants at 7 food processing plants in the state of Mississippi. 600 ICE agents went to different factories and prevented workers from leaving in the largest raid over the last decade. Officers demanded identification documents from employees and only let out those who had all legally required papers. The raids were carried out in an area populated mostly by Mexican workers. The children of the arrested migrants were left behind. Many cried in the streets as strangers tried to comfort them. Neighbors were said to be taking them to a local gym for the night. Our correspondent in Washington, Alina Duarte, provides us with a bit more context.
Yesterday, the largest raid in the U.S. over the last 10 years took place in the state of Mississippi. 680 undocumented people were arrested, some of which were actually U.S. citizens. According to the Washington Post, once they provided their migratory status, they were released. The prosecutor of the Southern Mississippi District, Michael Hurst, a Republican, said that the United States is a country of migrants, but also a country with laws, and he said that they would continue enforcing the law. Images which were seen yesterday over social media were of children who were abandoned. They were left completely alone as their parents were transported to detention centers. The kids, of course, did not know where they were being taken or if they'd be able to see them again. This is within a context of racism and xenophobia, which is in the public discourse, especially following this weekend, when shooting massacres took place, specifically in Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas, the latter in particular because of its racial hatred motivations, hate towards the Latino Hispanic community within the United States. Yesterday, demonstrators were in the streets of both cities during the visits of President Donald Trump, who they say is in part responsible for these tragedies for his role in spreading hate messages from the White House.
And Mexico's government says that all of its citizens who were detained on Wednesday can rely on consulates and assistance from the government through their legal process.
Upon learning of the operation yesterday, we requested information from the United States authorities regarding the identities of our connationals, and we ordered our consulates to deploy to the sites in order to be able to identify the Mexican nationals. We have already confirmed that 107 Mexicans have been detained during this operation. At this moment, personnel from our consulate in New Orleans are attending to our connationals in Mississippi as well as in other locations.
A Mexican school teacher who was killed in the El Paso terror shooting attack has been laid to rest in Ciudad Juárez. 57-year-old Elsa Mendoza Marquez was a dual American-Mexican citizen and was a principal at a Ciudad Juárez school. She was with her husband and son on the way to the airport and made a quick stop to run into Walmart at the time of the shooting. She would have been traveling to meet her daughter that day. Elsa and her husband had moved to El Paso 10 years ago to flee violence.
It's important to highlight that it hurts us a lot. It's shocking because teacher Elsa was a great human being. The truth is that it is a huge pain and concern that fills us people from Juarez and El Paso with uncertainty and pain.
We no longer know where we are safe.
A note addressed to the U.S. Embassy in Mexico reiterates Mexico's condemnation of the acts perpetrated against Mexican citizens over the weekend in El Paso. The letter says that hate speech should have no place within society, nor should white supremacy. Moving on, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro has instructed the government's delegation to not attend the next round of Norway-facilitated talks with the opposition in Barbados. This is as a result of the opposition's support for the latest United States unilateral coercive measures. On Monday, the U.S. froze all Venezuela's assets and prohibited its citizens and businesses from making transactions with the South American country.
I proposed permanent dialogue for the talks in Barbados with a fixed agenda. But this week, the imperialist United States has gone crazy. They've stabbed the soul of Venezuela, our economy, and even celebrated the move. Under these conditions, I say no to talks.
Venezuela's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has confirmed that the vessel carrying 25,000 tons of soy destined for Venezuela is still being held at the Panama Canal as a result of the U.S. blockade. Rodriguez said that the ship's insurance company hasn't authorized the cargo's arrival to Venezuela and demanded an immediate lifting of the blockade. Venezuelans demonstrated on Wednesday in rejection of the illegal blockade imposed on the Bolivarian country by the United States. The mobilization also commemorated the Battle of Boyacá, a decisive battle in Simón Bolívar's campaign to liberate Nueva Granada from Spanish rule. The Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of America issued a statement firmly rejecting the U.S. economic blockade. ALBA says the move is a new escalation of illegal, coercive, and unilateral measures. The document calls for Washington to abide by the principles of international law. The Caribbean Movement for Peace and Integration is urging the region to reject the hostile actions against Venezuela by the U.S. and support the democratic government led by President Nicolás Maduro. On Wednesday, General Secretary David Denny condemned the latest blockade against Venezuela. Denny also slammed the U.S. court ruling which permitted Canadian company Crystalex International to attach Venezuelan oil company Citgo to its portfolio, effectively stealing over $18 billion of the country's assets. Coming up after the break, a government minister has been arrested in Trinidad and Tobago on corruption allegations. Stay with us. Protests are taking place in Guatemala this week as tensions rise ahead of the country's runoff election on Sunday. The Campesino social organization Codeca has been protesting for the annulment of the first round of the elections, with just days until Guatemala's second round of voting, and both the former director and the former assistant director of the country's electoral court have been arrested for fraud. Our correspondent Rolando Segura has more from the capital.
It's just days before the second round of elections, and the Attorney General's Office for Electoral Crimes arrested the former director and assistant director of the Tech Department of the Electoral Court for allegedly destroying records. Gustavo Adolfo Castillo, former director of IT, had been fired after several doubts about the system used for counting the results of the first round of the elections on June 16. But the electoral authorities deny any inaccuracies.
And staying in Guatemala, President Jimmy Morales has caved into threats issued by U.S. President Donald Trump, who said he would impose tariffs if the country did not sign a safe third country agreement. The agreement means migrants seeking asylum in the U.S. will wait in Guatemala. However, many are concerned about the large figures of poverty and violence in the country.
In Guatemala, more than 125,000 families depend on the coffee industry for work. The crop is a great source of employment. It has motivated some to return from the United States to set up small businesses. So far, they have only seen losses, which means many are considering going back to the north, even if they have to do so illegally.
It's true. It's hard.
The low price of coffee and plant diseases have shattered the dreams of many of being a success in their home country. It's a zone where the contrast between houses can be explained by asking who has families in the US and who doesn't.
Although it's hard to get into the US, it doesn't stop people. They want to try their luck.
As hard as the journey might be, 10,000 families flee from Guatemala to the United States as a monthly average.
La pobreza. Poverty and the lack of jobs, opportunities, education, and guarantees for healthcare are the main reasons people are fleeing the country. In Guatemala, more than half the population is poor or live in impoverished condition. There are departments where poverty is so extreme that people are forced to leave.
More than 60% of the Guatemalan population faces multi-dimensional poverty, and more than 40% of children under 5 are malnourished. The indigenous population is the most affected, as it relates to access to basic services like drinking water, electricity, and sanitation.
Women are negatively affected by the division of labor, although they sustain a third of the economy, and of that third, 67% of women do not receive equal pay to men.
In the midst of these events, and the threat to tax Guatemalan goods and family remittances, the United States has imposed a migratory agreement where it describes Guatemala as a safe third country.
Guatemala is not a safe country. Look at the poverty indicators that make people migrate. Really, it's out of desperation or not finding opportunities. But there are also social violence indicators. The United States is even warning its citizens to take precautions when traveling to Guatemala.
Civil society is resisting the conversion of their country into a retaining wall against those seeking refuge in the US.
They are selling the idea to Guatemalans that they are going to be given a work visa. How easy will it be to get that visa? And how many nationals will be getting that visa when there are 40,000 Guatemalans deported from the US every month?
2 of Guatemala's presidential candidates have rejected the agreement of the so-called safe third country with the United States. However, in the plans they discussed during their campaigns, there has been no word on how they will address the structural causes of migration.
And now to Brazil, where around 17 legislators from 12 political parties across the political spectrum marched to the Supreme Court demanding they block the transfer of former President Lula da Silva to a prison for violent offenders. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Muir, has more.
At 10 a.m. on Thursday morning, a local district judge in the city of Curitiba in southern Brazil named Carolino Lebos issued a transfer order to remove former President Lula from the solitary confinement in the Curitiba Federal Police Headquarters, where he's been held since April 2018, to the São Paulo state prison system. Now, some people at this moment thought this was a good sign because it showed that his case might be being pulled away from jurisdiction of the Lava Jato task force, which leaked telegram conversations published in The Intercept revealed to have acted illegally last year, arresting him with no material evidence deliberately to remove him from the presidential elections and open the path to victory for far-right President Jair Bolsonaro. About an hour later, however, Lula's defense team issued a statement announcing that they had not made the transfer request and that they were worried they would open the door for the São Paulo government to put Lula in a common prison in a cell with violent offenders. At this point, Lula's daughter said she was afraid that her father might be killed if this happened, and there's a huge outpouring of support on social media like Twitter in solidarity with the former president. Shortly thereafter, a group of 70 congresspersons in Brasilia from 12 different political parties, including right-wing parties that had initially supported Jair Bolsonaro's presidential run, stormed the Supreme Court and demanded that they do something to block the transfer of the former president. And Supreme Court Justice Gilmar Mendes issued the order to cancel the transfer order.
We thank Brian Muir for that report. A government minister has been arrested in Trinidad and Tobago on corruption allegations. Embattled Public Administration Minister Marlene McDonald is being questioned by police regarding an investigation into the distribution of over $1 million to 3 organizations from her ministry. But the funds were never used for that purpose. Police are also continuing their investigation into the Calabar Foundation matter, in which McDonald allegedly arranged for her partner to receive state housing back in 2008. Meanwhile, officers are also probing concerns raised about nearly $600,000 paid by the Ministry of Community Development while she led that ministry under the Patrick Manning government.
One word
Barbados has welcomed Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and his wife Margaret for a 3-day official visit. Prime Minister Mia Mottley greeted the head of state at the Grant Lee Adams International Airport on Wednesday. A military 21-gun salute was performed while the national anthem was being played. Both countries will engage in bilateral talks and will partake in a business forum to sensitize officials on investment and trade opportunities in Kenya and Barbados. We head overseas now. Libyan authorities have deported more than 140 Sudanese migrants as part of a voluntary return program. This was the first group to be deported through a program aimed at returning home those migrants who volunteered to go back. Migrants in Libya have been facing safety challenges due to the ongoing conflict. Last month, dozens of migrants were killed and others injured when a migrant detention center in Tripoli was hit by a deadly airstrike. Libya is one of the main departure points for the sub-Saharan migrants heading for Europe.
I'm going back to Sudan. I'm a married man and I have children. I came here to work and provide for my children, to go back to them. My children are in school, thank God. I have taken what God has destined for me, and I am now going back to my children to look for new work.
And 30 minors along with 2 babies are among 121 migrants stuck on board at a ship in the Mediterranean Sea. Malta and Italy has refused the ship entry to their port on Wednesday, prompting the NGO to release footage of the situation inside the vessel. Proactiva founder Oscar Camps on Monday called on EU members to accept the migrants who were rescued last week from 2 boats off the Libyan coast. Congolese and Rwandese authorities have intensified border controls to prevent the spread of the Ebola virus between the 2 countries. Several citizens of both countries have been turned away from the border post as security forces conducted strict border checks and surveillance. The flow of people commuting between the 2 countries has decreased in the past week, and some people complained that the matter police officers at the border are treating.
We thought it was because of the epidemic, but now they are checking everyone. They ask you for your profession, identity card, and many other details. We had a lot of questions about it. We are calling on the authorities, asking why all these checks, if it's because of Ebola or if it's because of politics. At the moment, it's we, the ordinary people, who are suffering.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has won a court case against the country's anti-corruption watchdog. The public protector had recommended that Ramaphosa takes immediate disciplinary action against Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Jordan for his role in granting early retirement to a tax official in 2010. However, the court ruled that Ramaphosa has complied with the law by deferring disciplinary action against Gordon pending judicial review. Malawi's Constitutional Court has started hearing a presidential election challenge by the country's opposition parties. The opposition parties are disputing the re-election of President Peter Mutharika, whom they accuse of winning through electoral fraud. The Malawi Congress Party and the United Transformation Movement have joined forces to challenge the results of the May 21st presidential elections. The hearing happens amid protests by opposition supporters calling for the resignation of the country's Electoral Commission chairperson over rigging claims.
We had come prepared, nonetheless, to commence cross-examination, and we're still doing the preliminaries, but we wish we had been given time to go over the material that would prevent it from going on.
Coming up, tensions remain high in Jammu and Kashmir as India puts the region on lockdown. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tensions remain high in Jammu and Kashmir as India puts the region on lockdown. The nationalist government, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, controversially withdrew Jammu and Kashmir's semi-autonomous status on Monday. The move has been condemned as undemocratic and caused major diplomatic outrage in neighboring Pakistan, which has historically claimed sovereignty over parts of the larger Kashmir region.
There is no one in sight on the roads. It doesn't look like a curfew. People are imprisoned in their own homes. I feel like the situation in Kashmir will get worse and this could continue for the next 4 to 5 months. I feel like Kashmir is on the verge of burning. I feel like whatever the government has done for us is not right for us.
The escalation between the two states has caused concern as they share the world's most militarized de facto border. In the latest development, Pakistan has expelled India's High Commissioner to Islamabad.
Pursuant to the decision of the National Security Committee yesterday, the Government of India has been told to withdraw its High Commissioner to Pakistan. The Indian government has also been informed that Pakistan will not be sending its High Commissioner designate to India. On 5th August 2019, Pakistan strongly condemned and rejected the announcements made by the Indian government regarding the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which is an internationally recognized disputed territory.
And now to India. Floods brought by heavy rains and overflowing rivers have killed at least 33 people in western and southern India. Officials said 180,000 people were evacuated from their homes on Thursday. Rivers burst their banks in some parts of Maharashtra after authorities released water from dams that were full to maximum capacity. Monsoon rains from June to September caused deaths and mass displacement across South Asia every year. But they also deliver 70% of India's rainfall, crucial for farm output and economic growth. Ryanair pilots union BALPA is planning to strike for better working conditions in the UK. The first planned two-day strike will begin on August 22nd, with a second strike set for September 2nd. Just under 80% of union members voted for industrial action. Europe's largest budget airline, which only recognized unions in 2017, has announced impending job cuts. Fans of British band The Beatles gathered at the famous London Abbey Road crosswalk to mark the 50th anniversary of their famous album cover. Thousands of people assembled at the spot located near the intersection of Abbey and Grove End Roads, across the street from where the group made most of their recordings. The studios, which were later renamed Abbey Road, together with the zebra crossing, were granted protected status by the government in 2010. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.